We're going to have a great conversation here today with Joseph Olender, and he's going to talk through branding 101 with us. We have a lot of folks coming from the Cohart community, but some other folks that are here as well, just to hear insights from Joseph. And so we're going to have him kick us off in a presentation. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight him here. Uh, there's so many people popping up. I can't get to the three dots. Okay, Joseph is spotlighted, so he's ready for action. And before we dive in, I'm Kendall. I'm from Cohart. I'm the CEO, a co-founder of the platform, and we are building a platform that streamlines business management systems for artists and galleries, and then creates new discovery pathways for people to buy and sell art online. We had the privilege of working with Joseph to do our brand DNA and to build up the brand that we have today that we're so proud of. We've had tons of people that have come to Cohart because of the brand and have participated with the community because of our voice and because of our spirit. And it reflects, externally to how we position ourselves to the world, but also internally to our team. So it's been a big North Star for us. And again, it's been such an asset to have the opportunity to work with Joseph. So today we're going to hear all of his insights about branding and his expertise in a really simple format that he'll make extremely bite-sized for us as we get started on the branding journey. And one other thing to mention is that the original concept for the call came from just the idea that the value of art is subjective, and as an artist your personal brand is so important towards defining your value. And I think that's not unique to art. It's across creative industries, across most businesses. So that's part of the impetus for having Joseph on to lead this masterclass. So as I hand it to him, you can drop in a quick introduction on where you're calling in from in the chat. We want this to be interactive, so we'll have him present for the first half, and then we'll do a Q&A for the second. So just go ahead and drop in, questions, reactions, comments, and then at the end, we'll dive in. So Joseph, the ball is in your court.
Awesome. Oh, thank you, Kendall. That was such a generous introduction. Really, really kind words. Thank you so much for saying that. So excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I can geek out on it for hours. So I have a lot of information. I'll probably be talking at 1.5 speed. So please get your questions ready. Happy to clarify anything at that point. But first, I'm going to share some slides here. So we'll do a little tech check. And I'm not going to be able to see anybody. So please, like I said, the Cohart team is going to be facilitating Q&A at the end. And feel free to drop stuff in. But a little bit about myself, co-founder of a strategy firm called Major Futures. I'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. I'm a senior partner there as well. We're all senior partners. It's kind of a partner-run model where we have a shared set of centralized services. So rather than hire the firm, you hire individuals, which is kind of cool and a little bit disruptive in the industry. But by trade, I'm a brand strategist is what I call myself. And I've been doing this professionally for a little bit over a decade now. But the reality is that I've been practicing the principles of it for far longer. And we all have, and I'll talk about that in a second. And I didn't get into this out of a deep love of, SWOT analyses or EBITDA, although I do appreciate those things a lot now. I got into it because of the album cycle. I was a music nerd, a music fan, as many of us are. And the album cycle tells a story. Your favorite band goes away for a little bit, and they come back. You get a little tease, maybe a new photo style, maybe some new videos. You get the album art, you get the record, you get the tour. It's this chapter or moment in time that feels really important. And I think people love talking about brand, and I get questions about this all the time because it is so informative in terms of the way that we live. It informs and kind of helps guide us on choices we make around the cars that we drive, around the teams that we love, around the music that we make part of our identity, right? And that extends into other things like the brands that we wear in business, the tech stacks that we approve and sign off on, right? It's really all about the choices that we make. And a little bit more on my background. I've been very grateful to have been hired by some amazing companies to work on some really cool projects, all through the lens of brand strategy. So for some of these clients, there was research involved, some of which involved design, various activations, positionings, messaging, brand DNA, like Kendall talked about, but all through this lens of what's called, quote unquote, brand strategy that I'll talk about today. The reality is that brand strategy is actually a really simple practice, and I'll talk about why it's simple throughout the course of this next half hour or so. And it's very, very critical and incredibly valuable, but your success is not solely dependent on it, right? Longevity and influence are, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but you can't brand a business problem. You've got to have a really strong product foundationally to be able to wrap in a brand to get people to care, right? There still has to be utility to whatever it is that you're providing, the value that you're providing. And so why do brands hire me? I know this has been branded as a masterclass, but I have a very, very simple, very specific skill set, which is that I've been trained on a specific worldview that prioritizes pattern recognition, empathy, and an understanding of value exchange. And this has proven helpful for leaders looking to use brand as a growth lever. What we're going to talk about today is hard. It's really, really hard. It requires a lot of courage. And so when we're thinking about company values, our only value at Major Futures is courage. We talk about, courage to help leaders get courage to do the hard things, for us to go out and start businesses on our own, right? But this idea that brand is very vulnerable, it's very difficult, it's very long-term. You have to make hard decisions and say no to a lot to maintain a strong brand, especially in this day and age where businesses, corporations, nonprofits were really measured by quarters and by sales. And brand isn't really about sales. It helps sales. It influences sales. We'll talk about how it does in a minute. But you have, like I said, you have to say no to a lot and you got to do the hard things. And so really quickly, and probably half of you will drop off of this call after this slide, but what today is not, I want to be very clear about what this is not. This is not going to answer the questions, how do I make better content? This is not going to answer the question, how do I get more followers? Or how do I sell stuff more quickly? Or how do I look cooler? I'm not even going to use businessy sounding terms. EBITDA and SWOT analysis, that was my quota. So it's done. That's all over now. What today is all about, it's going to be much more science than art. I'm going to share a different way of observing the world around us that is both timeless and relevant to our current moment. And I'm going to help you understand how you can use that to your advantage to achieve your business goals and future-proof your career or your business. And so the key question here as we think about what this is, when we think about brand strategy and sort of the tenets of it, it's asking a really simple question. How do I create and cultivate a deep and strong relationship with the people I need to care about me? And I say I, could be a business, could be a person. I say people, it could be market, hiring manager, employee, somebody you're trying to get to hire you, et cetera, maybe an audience for your media or your podcast. And I say people because I really want to reinforce at the end of the day that everybody on the end of these buying decisions are humans. And we are very, very simple, basic creatures who understand story and feeling way more than logic, right? We are emotional beings. So a little agenda for what we're going to talk about over the course of the next, let's say 30 minutes or so. We'll do a little brand 101. Then we'll share some examples and we can kind of talk through why I think they're good examples. They will be very big examples, not small examples. And I'll tell you why, but I'm happy to answer questions about kind of smaller, more niche examples. And then I'll share kind of where I think the future is going and how brand plays into that and how you can use it to your advantage. There'll be time for questions. Cool. So a little brand 101. I mentioned that I started my career helping creatives. And one of my favorite things is that I would talk to creatives and they'd go, I don't want to be a brand. I don't want to do social media. I don't want a website. I don't want to be promoting or self-promoting or any of this stuff. And I understand why that is. And it's one of the things I'm most frustrated about. And it's ruining my business, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Because people talk about branding as if it is the thing that I'm going to be talking about, which is brand. And they think high production value, kind of glossy and expensive. They think kind of like gross American Psycho, Patrick Bateman business cards and like salesy techniques, right? Because we're bombarded with branding every single day. And since we are all marketed to, we think we are marketers, right? And so you hear like political party X needs better branding or the Kardashians are great at branding. But I want to be really clear, that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is brand, which as we'll come to learn on this call is a completely different thing from branding. The cold, harsh reality is that every single person on this call, every geographic place or city that you find yourselves in, every company you work for, all have a brand because brand is not a thing. Brand is what we think and feel about X. Sometimes it's curated and crafted. Sometimes it's not. That's the choice that you have after this call. And so what I like to say is that everyone, every place, every organization has a brand and you all have agency. You can either work to shape that perception or you can leave it to chance. And brands that leave it to chance are generally more unsuccessful. And so then I get to come back and tell that whiner that you lose. Everybody has a brand, and this is how we have to think about it. Anyway, not helping the cause is that we live on the internet, and on the internet, lots of people have opinions. Everyone thinks they're a marketer because they've been marketed to, like I said. But even amongst the really, really smart thinkers, the really high quality experts, all the definitions are both accurate and incomplete because it's really hard to boil brand down to a simple definition. It's this uniquely human alchemy that is sort of all of these things at the same time. It's both indescribable and all around us. It's like when the kids talk about aura, it's both like highly describable and also undefinable, right? So when you look at these different definitions from very respected people like David Ogilvy and Jeff Bezos and Walter Landor, excuse me, they all kind of revolve around this idea of intangibility, of what people say about you, of expectations and meaning and a promise, right? Very kind of relatable terms. But if you ask me to boil it down to something that's kind of applicable for our conversation today, for our purposes today, I'd probably say something like this. I would, admittedly, this is also accurate and incomplete, but it's a shot. And as I said, I'm not going to talk in business terms today, but I find it easier to communicate these topics through kind of day-to-day language because brand is not a sophisticated topic owned by PhD gatekeepers, right? It's really simple. It's cultivating feeling. And so when we think about brand, we can think about it as a psychological shortcut that drives preference, increases loyalty, and shapes identity. So the psychological shortcut is applicable across your entire life. But when you're using it for your business or in service of career goals or really in any goals, thinking about how it drives preference, increases loyalty, and shapes identity are very, very important. But I think it's probably summed up best by somebody famous for talents that are not business related, though very applicable to business. Maya Angelou's very famous quote, you probably all have read this or heard this. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so as we're thinking about our brand, we really need to focus on how we're making people feel and how that advances our own goals. I'll bring another nice man in here, another teacher, a real master for a second to gently offer a shift in vocabulary as we embark on this brand journey together. It's also really helpful. This is a very helpful nugget when you're looking at brands and observing brands in the world. It also makes giving feedback to people like me when we're working together much more actionable and much more frictionless. And I'm going to bring in my friends Bowen Yang and A.D. Bryant here for a little trend analysis. Out are the phrases good brands and bad brands. In are the phrases clear brands and unclear brands. Not just because good and bad are subjective, but because clarity is representative of the brands that are doing it, quote unquote, right. So as we're thinking about whether things are good or bad, change that to clear or unclear. One of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite living philosophers and writers, this guy Yuval Noah Harari, he wrote the book Sapiens, if any of you are familiar with that. He's been a really big inspiration in how to recognize patterns and signals about what's timeless through the noise about what's being focused on at any given moment. In a world deluged by irrelevant information, clarity is power. This has been true about humans since the beginnings. And to feel something, we have to understand it. And clarity helps us in that understanding. And so making people feel something strategic about you requires a thoughtful brand strategy that considers more than just communications and messaging. Every interaction that you have, every interaction that individuals have, people have with you in your business, influence and shapes what those people feel and perceive. So if we've established that we are all brands and our goal as brands is to make people feel something valuable about us, we want them to feel it quickly, believe it, recall it. That has to go beyond communications and messaging. That's where clarity comes in. And a lot of times people think messaging is a brand. They say, I need a rebrand. Let's go make a tagline. Or they say, I need a rebrand. Let's go make an advertisement. Okay. But that's just one part of it. And imagine if you're only focusing on that, you show up to a basketball court to play in high heels, or you wear a t-shirt to a finance interview. You want to be friendly, yet you're scowling all the time. All of these brand ingredients influence the brand. Communications are an expression of the brand, but the brand is not a thing, as we've established. It lives in the mind of our audiences. And so a really good brand strategy is baked in self-awareness, data, empathy, the ability to audit all of the different ways in which you are communicating, not just verbally, not just from a communication standpoint, and rally those around one singular, clear, definable, ownable idea that you want transmitted in the mind of your audiences. These people haven't said a word to you, yet you already assume things about them. And that's because 93% of communication is nonverbal. That includes 55% through body language, so things like facial expressions, postures, gestures, 38% through tone of voice. And so what that means is if you're only focusing on communications and messaging, you're only focusing on about 7% of the way that we cultivate perception and the way that we communicate to others. And so how that ends up affecting things like marketing, the way that we communicate, is you have to have an anchor point. You have to have something that all of this is anchored in that drives clarity, because it takes 5 to 7 impressions for a person to remember a brand. And that consistency is most powerful through nonverbal signals. So brand strategy is, it charts who you are and why you matter over time. Even a brand like Coca-Cola is more or less the same as it's been for the last 150 years, right? But marketing is flexible. Marketing is designed to communicate to different audiences in the short term. So when you're thinking about your brand versus the way that you show up on social media or the way that you market, it's very important to remember, I need my brand to show up in way X for thing or person X. I need to show up in Y for thing or audience or person Y. And so to be maximally effective, brand expressions, whether this is marketing or anything else, have to tie back to the strategy. So I'll show another big example. This is Nike. Nike's brand, as they tell it, as they say it, is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. There's an asterisk next to the word athlete, and it says, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Congratulations, everybody. We are all athletes. Thank you, Nike. And these are two versions of advertisements, right? One is brand marketing, it's brand advertising, which is just trying to get us to associate certain things with the swoosh. That's it. That's the whole goal. And one is product marketing, which is designed to get us to be compelled to buy a specific product. It's shoes. Shocker. It doesn't really matter what the product is by way for this example. But the brand marketing says, find your greatness. So it's a kid looking down at a high dive. Nike is his inspiration to conquer this fear and jump, right? On the right side here, this product, it's kind of small. It's maybe hard to read, but at the bottom, it says, this shoe works if you do. So you can see now, understanding this context, just do it actually has way more potency, because it's not the it that matters, it's the do. You could win a world championship like LeBron James, or you could get up off the couch and walk around the block and feel good about yourself. And Nike is the one to help you do it. And all these little touch points matters. And this is a guy named Sir Johnny Ive. He was the one of the most famous industrial designers in the world, probably more influential on Apple's brand than anybody other than Steve Jobs. Designed the iPhone, designed the Apple Watch, designed everything you can think of with Apple. Was recently hired by OpenAI. He's going to be working with Sam Altman on that brand and those products. And this is from an interview that he did with, I think it was Square a couple months ago. And it's kind of making the rounds, but I love it because I think this says more about brand than most people who have written books on this. I believe that when somebody unwrapped that box, the Apple iPhone box, and took out that cable, the way that it was wrapped very beautifully and meticulously, they thought somebody gave a shit about me. Even though it was a small thing, it really did come genuinely from a place of love and care. And so you can see how these relationships that we have with these things are built up through thousands and thousands and thousands of small touch points, not just what you say, but the way that you act and the choices that you make. I do want to talk for a second about attention, because attention is not a bad thing. I'm talking a lot about long-term kind of growth and long-term relationship building, but attention is not the opposite of brand. It's actually really, really important. The question is, when you get that attention, what do you do with it? Who do people get to know? This is Chumbawamba. Maybe this is an old reference for a lot of you. This is the I Get Knocked Down song. I like thinking about attention in the context of one-hit wonders. This song charted higher than anything that the Foo Fighters have ever had, anything that Pearl Jam has ever had, anything that the Red Hot Chili Peppers have ever had, and most of Taylor Swift's catalog. This song was higher on the charts than any of those. Yet we don't think about them anymore. Why don't we think about them? Because Chumbawamba made this kind of funny, hilarious song about basically drinking that everybody really liked. And then when they actually looked into the band, it had nothing to do with what it is that song was. They were anarchists, kind of crazy, folks who had all kinds of wild views and whatever. And they're like, this was not what I was promised. This isn't what attention I gave. I gave my attention to this thing. I wanted something else. So the point is that when you get that attention, when you get that virality, what do you do with it? My favorite quote about brand value is from a guy named Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU, has a couple podcasts. He says a brand is unearned margin. What does that mean? It means that at parity, brand is what you can charge based on the relationship that people have to you. So preferred brands can charge 20 to 30% more for similar competitive offerings. People emotionally connected to a brand have a 306% higher lifetime value. They're 3 times more likely to recommend it, 3 times more likely to purchase it again, 4 times more likely to defend it when something goes wrong. And even in low trust industries, which is a massive trend that we'll get into, trusted brands within those sectors outperform competitors dramatically. Think Apple within big tech. And what this results in is advocacy, efficiency, and freedom. It allows you to have an army of trusted brand evangelists. It gives you market resilience and forgiveness. It gives you lower CAC, more efficient marketing, shorter decision-making time to purchase, and it gives you more financial flexibility because you don't have to tie it all up in marketing. You can choose to make bigger bets. You can extend into other opportunities. You have more margin and more flexibility. And that's resulted in a lot of kind of cool things. I love the makeup space as an example for this. Rhode, Hailey Bieber's makeup brand, was just purchased by e.l.f. for over $1 billion. Why? Probably because of the phone cases more than the product. Our guy Chalamet, probably in between sitting courtside at the Knicks, rocking a Glossier hoodie. That brand was valued at $1.8 billion a few years ago. The best rationale I heard for this purchase of Rhode was e.l.f. dominates shelves, Rhode dominates social feeds, and together they can dominate culture. And so that's a really good example of where it has very little to do with the product at all. These are very inexpensive products to make, very easy to distribute. And yet, because of everything else that surrounds it, the story, the relationship that people have with these brands, the value is massive. So I want to share some clear brands, some examples of what I think are clear brands. And one way to do this, and you can kind of test this in your own ecosystems, is what I call the around the table test. Not a focus group, but if you asked 5 to 10 people to sit around a table who are from your audience to describe you, would they all say more or less similar things? Kind of like the definition of brand. They're not going to be exactly identical, but more or less you start to get at the same thing. I'm going to use big examples here because we are not all of the same audience. So we have to use kind of more macro examples, but you can do this with niche examples as well. And one of the things to think about with this test is when a brand is described in one way, do people who love the brand use that as a reason to love it? And do people who hate the brand use that as a reason to hate it? That's clarity. Probably one of the last remnants of the monoculture, Taylor Swift. Well, she plays the victim. Well, because she's bullied, right? 2 sides of the same coin. Well, she's a princess. Well, she's a princess, right? She's strategic. No, she's calculated, right? You kind of get to see all these kind of, it's looking at the same thing from multiple different lenses, but all describing the thing in the same way. He's a whiner. No, he's not. He's a fighter. He's corrupt. No, he's not. He's a deal doer. He's a strong man. No, he's not. He's shaking things up, right? We all know these things because we're bombarded with them every day. And we all have similar ways of describing them and just place different value judgments on that. If you have haters, I like to say this to people who are starting brands. If you have haters, it's a good thing because it means you're being clear about what you stand for. And it also gives you an opportunity to double down on your values and what you believe. Apple, people would basically say technology with a soul. And I showed you a picture of an apple with a bite out of it. You didn't think about this, guaranteed. You thought about this, what Johnny Ive described, the incredible way in which the package is presented, the magical feeling of opening it up, right? The fact that it integrates so effortlessly into your life and so frictionlessly into your life. That is not done because they have really glossy ads. It's done a lot because of the product, but it's all of these thousands and thousands of touch points adding up. Starbucks, everybody's third place. I don't know where this Starbucks is. It could literally be anywhere because they all look and feel more or less the same, right? They have a new CEO. Starbucks sales had slowed. They hadn't really innovated. They'd sort of watered down their product. They started writing on the cups again. And this has been very polarizing. Again, that's why it's a very clear idea. Some people think it builds connections. Some people think it slows down the pace. Some people have been kind of put off by, is this flirting? Some people love it because they think it's funny. But the point is that they're trying to make it feel like a place where more humanity and connection is infused. And I'll just share one example of what I think is a new brand that's doing very, very well. And if we were to do the around the table test and we got 5 to 10 people who go to the beach all the time and are big sunscreen purchasers, we'd probably be able to have a conversation about this. But this is a brand called Vacation. They are a sunscreen brand. And if you know anything about sunscreen, you know that it retails for anywhere between, let's say, $5 to $10 a bottle, right? What Vacation has done, and you can't experience it through this ad, but they have gone all in on scent. Scent is the strongest sense tied to memory. Vacation is a memory you long for. And this sunscreen retails for $22 a bottle. They have other really great brand clarity ways of communicating brand clarity. They have interesting names like Classic Whip or After Sun Gelée or Chardonnay oil, right? Fun little tactics and touch points. But the idea is you're buying into this idea of a thing that you love and want more of, this memory, this emotion that has nothing to do with the liquid in the bottle. And what this is meant is, or the way that this has helped, is it has, they get people to post about it. They get people to gift it. It's a huge gift. They get people to display it. When you're out on vacation and you're taking your little picture on the chaise lounge, you have like your cocktail and your vacation sunscreen, right? It becomes something that you buy into. And so you can see how this is very different, right, than Coppertone. Not just in the way that they're communicating, but in the way that they have cultivated everything around this very, very valuable idea. And I think we're entering a new era, and this is where I think we all have immense opportunity. Gallup polls, every summer, Gallup polls folks, Americans, about the health of 14 major institutions, things like the state of religion, the state of the military. Do you trust the Supreme Court, public schools, banks, television news, et cetera, et cetera. We're at the lowest level ever recorded right now in 2024. It's hard to see because this graph is kind of weird, but it's almost been cut in half. It started about 40%. This is the average of those categories in 1994, about 28% now. So it's going down. And when you break it down by institutions, it actually gets a little bit more interesting, right? You can see here, most things are not just rated low, but every single year they're getting lower. Whether that's newspapers, public schools, the church, all these places that we identify with and that we relate with, right? But what's at the top of the list? I find this very fascinating. The two at the top of the list are the military and small business. Now, let's remove military for a second, and let's just talk about small business. Why is small business still trusted? Small business is still trusted because you see, touch, and feel small businesses. You know them. You see them. You experience them. They're imperfect. They screw up your order, right? But you know that they're trying. You know that they give a shit about you. These aren't the brands that have big marketing or advertising budgets. These are brands that are shaped every day by their micro interactions and the reputation, which is broadcast through that. And the same can be said about the military. Maybe a little bit different here in New York where I am, or out in Los Angeles where I'm from, but across the country, if you know somebody in the military, you have great reverence and respect for that, right? And so when you know somebody who's involved, that becomes very, very important. And why is this important? Because small businesses in the United States employ about 62 million people, which is about 46% of the private sector workforce or 38% of the overall workforce, which means that statistically, everybody on this call, 40% of the people that we know personally has a story to tell about their employer. The business becomes a human to you, and you trust humans. You don't trust anything else, but you do trust humans, especially humans that you know. And so we're entering this era of hyper personalization, and we should have seen this coming. I mentioned Coca-Cola as a brand that stood the test of time. Let's look at some communications from them over the course of the last 100 years, right? Delicious and refreshing, talking about describing the taste through the newspaper, so maybe people like it. It's the real thing, not some knockoff soda, right? That became a tagline that they really leaned on. We, Coca-Cola, are good people because we care about the people you care about, veterans, soldiers who are off at war, right? Or who have just come home. The condensation, right? Now we have photography, the feeling of a cold Coke on a warm summer day, right? That it's the real thing. We start to get some data, right? As we move closer and further throughout the 1900s. We know you, consumer. We know you love New Kids on the Block. We know you're going to go to that show, and we want to show up where you are because we love you. We know you, right? And so if we know you, you're going to love us. maybe more endorsements. You get the most famous athlete of the last 100 years, Michael Jordan, right? Can't beat the real thing. And then all of a sudden, about 10 years ago, they changed. And they launched this Share a Coke With campaign. It's still around. This is one of the corporations, one of the global corporations that has more data and tests and does more analysis than maybe any other company in the world, right? Incredibly deep pockets. And so you can look at these big companies as kind of signals for what's to come. And this was a signal of the hyper personalization to come. Coke understood that there are fewer and fewer moments. There are fewer and fewer Taylor Swifts and Donald Trumps, right? We used to live in a monoculture where there was a shared existence, a sort of shared understanding of the world. You had radio stations that broadcast to whole cities that had massive listenership. Sports teams mattered even more than they do now. Even the early days of social media, the people who were in on the jokes, there was kind of all these inside jokes and it was fun, right? And the goal was to kind of break through, quote unquote, to be heard or understood. But that's no longer the case. What's in, to use the terminology of our trend friends, Adie and Bowen, is what I'm calling the connection economy. It's this sort of blend of the creator economy, the passion economy, and community-led growth. And all of these things that are sort of part of that use the same tenets that we've been discussing today. This is brand, let's call it 6.0, right? They're all built on trust. You have your personal brand, which is the intentional strategic practice of defining and expressing your value, right? Everything that we talked about can be attributed to you as an individual and the way that you broadcast and relate. You have parasocial relationships, right? That podcast host who you've never met or spoken to in your life, but you know, right? You know that person. Very one-sided, where one person extends emotional energy, interest, and time, and the other party is completely unaware of the other's existence. And then communities and community-led growth, right? That every single brand has the opportunity to own and curate a space, whether physical or digital, to connect with their audience, right? To give them meaning. The old gates have broken. You have power for the first time ever. You have agency to make choices about how you show up in your world of influence and matter. We live in a world now where the sitting president of the United States gets interviewed by a guy in his garage because that's more powerful than going on CNN. Where a teacher in COVID, when all the kids are home from school, can make videos and then inevitably get a deal with Disney, right? Where micro influencers are trusted more than any advertisement, okay? Just a quick stat here with respect to podcasts and their reach. And this is, I know there's a sort of joke of like everybody has a podcast, but like they're not slowing down. They're not slowing down at all. With respect to Joe Rogan and Trump, when Trump went on Joe Rogan, there were 40 million views on YouTube and I think 15 million audio downloads in the first, I think it was first week, maybe first 2 weeks. Just by way of comparison, for Vice President Harris to have gotten the same number of impressions, she would have had to have gone on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News every single night for 3 hours for 2 weeks. That's crazy. And we have the power to do all of this. We are all influencers now in our own space, right? This is where the king or queen is the individual. The individual is the king or queen of their own ecosystem. You may have heard recently that Nike is hurting, and they are. And part of why they're hurting is that they have disruptors who are niche players who have changed the way that brands are communicating with their audiences. So previously, I showed you the Nike example. The goal when there was a monoculture was, well, I'm selling to somebody who's going to wear Nikes because that broadcasts something to the larger group about who they are and why they matter. Thus, I wear Nikes, so you should like me, right? Now you have brands like On Running making running shoes for folks so that they can feel themselves like they are runners. It's more about an identity to the individual and about the story that they tell about themselves rather than the story that they tell about the world, because we're living in our own little bubbles. That's why their run clubs were so effective, right? By way of example. You'll never see them advertise on the Super Bowl or on ESPN, but they are absolutely crushing it. And so I've put together this kind of trust formula, because if we're thinking about brand 101, if we're thinking about how this applies to businesses, how it applies to you and your own sphere of influence, you can start to think about it like this. And this is not perfect math. It's a metaphor. So don't try to solve for different variables, right? But it's this idea of empathy plus self-awareness compounds with clarity and consistency, and that equals trust, right? Trust emerges when both your signals, your clarity and your consistency, and your depth, your empathy and your self-awareness are strong and working together. So one way to think about this is that you have your internal orientation, you have your external signaling. One side of it is, I know who you need me to be, and I am confidently that thing. and I am showing up how you expect me to all or most of the time. And you can solve for each of these variables. You in your own world can start to work on each of these to build trust in your sphere of influence, right? For empathy, know everything you can about your audience. We have incredible tools that let us know people in a way that's never been known before, which is why we're entering this era of personalization. Self-awareness, have a unique and compelling story. In 2 slides, I'll show you how we do that. Clarity, take that story and make it very simple, and then use it in ways that reinforce your story, right? 5 things. 1, your advantage is data. 2, embrace tension and quirks, because like Harari says, humans learn in stories. Stories need tension. That's how you build trust. You don't build trust by faking like everything's good all the time. You build trust by showing your scars, right? Clarity is more important than cleverness. The reason is anybody can be clever, but once you get that attention, what are you going to do with it, right? Consistency is key because brand is built over time, and small is the new big. Don't try to play to the monoculture. Play very specifically to a narrow group of people who you know and you need to know you, right? And that's how you win. And so when you're thinking about sort of next steps and what do you do, well, start here. Answer the question, who are you and why do you matter to the people who you need to care about you, right? That question that we led off the presentation with, right? This is I wouldn't be a consultant without a chart. This is a chart that I like to use. It's called the hierarchy of belief, right? In thinking about your brand story, chart everything about your brand on this. At the bottom, list out features and functions, things like what you do, what your capabilities are, things that any other competitor could also claim, right? As you move up the ladder, maybe there are some proprietary attributes. Maybe you have really interesting credentials as an individual or really interesting awards as an artist that go up here that others may have as well, but that kind of reinforce the story that you're going to tell. And then you have this top level, this authentic, ownable, compelling, meaningful belief, right? And I'll give you guys a framework. This is a sort of academic framework I learned about 15 years ago that I think is still relevant. Brands that anchor their strategy, story, and experience on a core human meaning tend to be more successful. So when you get up to that top level, start thinking about how to anchor that story in one of these. Accomplishment, beauty, community, creation, duty, enlightenment, freedom, harmony, justice, oneness, redemption, security, truth, validation, and wonder. I won't go through all of them, but Harley Davidson doesn't sell motorcycles, they sell community. Soul Cycle doesn't sell spin classes, they sell redemption. Disney doesn't sell t-shirts or park passes, they sell the idea of wonder. And even in the B2B SaaS space, ServiceNow they're one of the fastest growing brands. I doubt people on the call even know who they are. They're one of the fastest growing brands in the space, starting to compete with the ADPs and the SAPs and the Workdays of the world. And their entire brand that they rebranded recently is built on the harmony of what AI can do for your business. So even they are just absolutely killing it right now. I met the CBO a couple of weeks ago, and he's an incredibly interesting and wise man about this stuff in a way that I think a lot of consumer brands have already tapped into. Also, Wonka's about wonder too. It's why I got him tattooed on my arm. So, come on, he's the best. So solve for that internal orientation first, and then have fun. Be creative about how you show up, but just do it in ways that clearly tie back to that North Star, to that internal orientation. Be very simple to understand. That doesn't mean short necessarily. It just means be understandable and show up in ways that reinforce your story. And so if you can do this, you can start building trust and use that trust to your advantage to grow your business, to grow your career, to grow whatever your and pursue whatever your goals are. And I'll just end with one thing, which is constantly I get, well, what about AI? What's AI going to do? How is AI going to affect all this stuff? How's it going to affect branding? AI is going to affect everything. I'm just going to say it. It's going to probably affect my job. It's probably going to affect a lot of your jobs as well. But think about it as kind of a co-opetition, right? It's also an incredibly powerful tool that you can use to your advantage. And the tenets of brand psychology, everything that we talked about today, this worldview that this lens that I'm trying to articulate for you all to use, is agnostic to AI. It doesn't matter. This has been the way that humans have always related far before the wheel, far before fire or the printing press. Perception is going to be our reality for the future, right? So if you treat your career as a brand, if you use this lens and this worldview, it'll help you stand out from the competition and it'll help you get into the rooms you want to be in. Use AI to your advantage. There are many different ways in which I use it in my job every single day. And also understand that AI is going to be your competition. If you only focus your brand story on output, AI is probably going to be better at output than you are, right? But if you think about it in terms of a tool that you use to curate or to get to this deeper truth or this deeper understanding, or you can present information in a really interesting way, or you can help somebody have courage and inspire them and be around them, um, that story goes far beyond just bullets on a resume, right? Or capabilities or kind of outputs that you have. And so as we kind of wrap up all of this conversation about what brand is and why it matters, and this kind of new lens to look at the world through, I think also appreciate that as we hear about the advancements of AI, we still can use that to our advantage if we focus on these tenets in this worldview. And with that, I will say thank you, and see if we have time for, I think we got like 15 minutes for questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joseph. I see people clapping on mute. We can throw up some emojis just to say thank you for that amazing presentation. I just love hearing you talk through all of this all the time. I'll let people drop in some questions in the chat and you can go ahead and raise your hand. But I guess just one starting question that I had was just you talked about the end of the end of the monoculture. Why did that happen? Like the rise of social media, like the internet and all this shifting. And it's an exciting time for small businesses. So like how can small businesses capitalize on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is the democratization of information. I mean, I think Cohart is really kind of tapping into that with like what you guys are doing in terms of bringing these capabilities to a larger group of people. I mean, people like Theo Vaughn or Joe Rogan didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They showed up and people chose them instead of things that we are used to, like CNN and the New York Times, right? And so I think what's happening is you just have more options. We have more options as a marketplace, and with that, I think there's more opportunity as well. And so thinking about yourself as a brand, as a thing that can use trust to your advantage, once you understand what it is that the audience needs from you, what they desire, what they want from you, you have an opportunity to provide that. And if you can build that trust over time and you become chosen, it's sort of a it's like, that's why I use kind of the human analogies, is it's like a friendship or like a relationship. Like when the switching costs are so high emotionally at that point that you feel like you're letting somebody down, you feel like you're breaking up with somebody rather than just like picking a different option. And so I think really doubling down on that, uh, it allows individuals to focus on like what's really important and find a very specific audience to communicate to.
Mm. Yeah, I always get stressed when I like go to a different coffee shop than my local one. I'm like, oh, I'm letting them down. They build the relationship there. Um, Jess, I know you have a question. Do you feel like you want to jump in? I can ask it as well,
I
but I don't know if you want to.
Sure. I would thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I got a lot out of that, and I love how you used imagery to really help get your points across. My question is really, as a lot of visual artists, for me, I'm making something that is like coming from my heart a lot of the time, but I don't really necessarily know how to approach understanding what the audience needs. Like from a marketing or like sharing standpoint, would that be looking at what they respond to the most from videos we put out or content or the work itself? Because yeah, I think that's something. I love my audience, but I don't necessarily know what they need.
So that's a totally fair question. I think that there's a couple ways to answer that and a couple ways to look at it. I think number one is, if you are looking, I think just knowing is really important. So I think especially with artists, the relationship is so strong that if you took 5 people of your Instagram followers, right? Like your 5 most active followers, and you reached out to them and you said, hey, I'm just trying to learn more about, I'm thinking about making some decisions and kind of doing things a little bit differently. And I'd like to just kind of like pick your brain on what you think of me, right? Having that information, whether you choose to act on it or not, is really, really valuable. And so I think trusting that folks want to be and sort of build that two-way relationship, I think is really, really important. I think the second thing, and this is really important, and I think particular to artists, is that it's important to remember that like, if art is, and this, I don't mean for this to sound harsh, but I just want to be kind of realist in sort of the context of business here. Like if your goal is just purely to emote, That's beautiful and that's wonderful and fantastic. But that you're leaving your brand to chance, like I said in the upfront. That doesn't mean you won't be successful. It just makes it a lot harder. And so, understanding that brands are shaped by careful curation, and it doesn't have to be manipulative. It doesn't have to be calculated, but I think it does have to be thoughtful. And so, kind of separating those two or understanding that it might be quote unquote a necessary evil to get you to where you want to be in terms of levels of success, is really important. And then I think the third thing, and the reason that I wanted to separate brand from branding is that, art is what you sell. Art is the output. Art is kind of the thing that people see, right? But if you give folks other touch points to access you, right? Whether that's at an art fair or whether it's online or whether it's, through podcasts, I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing here. If there are other opportunities for them to access you and what you do, then it allows more of a relationship to be built. And so if it's just through your art, that's kind of a little bit narrow. Doesn't mean it won't be effective, but it's just kind of, again, brand is really about using perception to access goals. And so I think you need to be clear about what your goals are first.
Thank you so much. What a great answer.
Thank you.
Stephanie, I know you have a question about the slides. Do you want to chime in with any question in here? Or do you want to just get it in the recap?
I think the recap might be enough. I think my only question is if there was like more to expound on in terms of like the next steps, like how to apply that formula. If you have any examples, maybe specifically for the lens or for the perspective of a visual artist.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that there is here. I'll pull up the slides real quick just to be able to reference them. I think that there is you have your various channels and the places that you show up. And I think it's, again, about that self-awareness of like, where am I actually showing up and what do people need from me? And so my really, really firm next step, the thing that I think is most important, and I just referenced it in my previous answer, is really get to know everything you can about your audience. And that doesn't even necessarily mean know what they want from you. I think that's something that you have to infer. But if you understand that, like, the people who are buying my art, right? If I want to sell a lot of art and I understand that the people who are buying my art are, mid 30s, couples in an urban area that are, Henrys, high earners, not rich yet, who really use art as like a way to show off their identity, right? Well, there are some things that you can discern about that audience. They're probably going to, members clubs. They're probably on certain social media. They probably follow certain accounts on social media, right? They probably listen to certain podcasts. You can find all that information online now because everything is so personalized. And so I think even more important than how you get kind of clear and consistent in showing up is really understanding what those variables are in terms of the psychology of your audience. Again, not hearing like, I want more pictures that are blue or I want more pictures that are red. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, understanding how they think and how they live, and then fitting into that, I think is the most powerful part of this equation, in my opinion.
Jess has a great, thorough question. Jess, I don't know if you want to jump on and ask this one. I'm happy to relay it as well.
Sure. Are you able to hear me? I'm just on my AirPods, so I'm not sure if I'm
I
connecting.
got you. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a quick example and then a question. Wanted to toggle back to September of 2022 when the founder of Patagonia made national news by announcing he was donating his $3 billion company to charity, essentially creating a trust solely dedicated to protecting nature and undeveloped land. That was a brilliant example of a brand choosing to respond to current events in a meaningful, perhaps monumental way. They really owned that idea of protecting our home planet during a moment when we were all considering what home really meant. So I guess what I'm wondering is, are there any brands you've seen who have been recently responding well? Any brands utilizing values, their identities, their creative talents to respond to the current moment in a meaningful way? And I want to say, we have HBO playing around with the idea of rebranding. Are they HBO Max? Are they just Max? And they're teasing this collaboration with the Chicago-based popcorn company. But are there any other brands responding in ways that matter today?
It's a fantastic question, and I think responding in relevant ways, that is really, I think, a key component to this next frontier of brand strategy and the way that we think about showing up, right? I love the Patagonia example. I think that there's a couple different places to take this. I'll just sort of touch on HBO real quick because I actually have a contrarian opinion on the Max thing. I think the Max was a good idea, but we can talk about that over cocktails sometime for anybody who's interested. I just think the execution was very poor. But I think that we went through this era where brands were really, I think, especially around like DE and I, really expressing that in very visible ways, loudly. One of my favorites was Nike creating the first hijab for athletics. I thought that was really cool at a time when there was a lot of Islamophobia. That was really important. I think there's been a little bit of a retreat on that, but there also still are companies, more so, I would say, less visible examples like in the B2B space where hiring is really important, where, we're seeing a pushback on the DEI pushback, right? And that sort of diversity is showing up in different kind of ways. And there are certain brands that are really holding firm to commitments and what that means. And, that's kind of where I've focused on in terms of what the way that brands are responding. I think you're seeing it less and less in sort of like consumer spaces, in very like flashy sort of advertising like ways. But the way that brands are talking about, maintaining those standards or ditching them altogether, I think are both relevant, Jess, to your question around like how are brands responding. It's a very challenging time. There's a real microscope on a lot of organizations right now.
We're going to have more questions than time. So we'll go with the next question, just measuring success of your brand and just kind of go rapid fire, Joe.
I love this question because I get it all the time and it sounds like I'm telling people not to hire me, but you can't measure brand success. You just can't. It's not ROI-able like a ad campaign or like a marketing campaign or like a CPC campaign. The way that we measure success with brands is we measure equities that people associate with the brand. So things like is a fun brand, is inclusive, stands for X, is a brand that I would refer to others, right? Like, things like that. And you can measure that over time. And so the goal is not, are more people buying or are we seeing an increase in sales? Those are always measured for different reasons. But for brands specifically, we're trying to see if the equities that we strategically want to be associated with that we believe are good for our business and our community are growing. And I don't mean good like, positive. I mean like that reinforce our position and help us stay clear. So it's done by equities, not by necessarily, things like impressions.
Rapid fire. Perspective on nonprofit branding.
Nonprofit branding is one of the most underutilized opportunities that exists out there. A lot of times within corporate world, we think about brands competing for wallet share. In nonprofit world, not only are they competing for wallet share, but they're also competing for heart share. So nonprofit brands have a lot of clients in that space, and we preach the same things: be clear. But we think about sales, we think about donations and kind of like procurement and all that as an advancement as sales, and we treat that as a sales team. So all of the same business tenets apply to nonprofits with the obvious caveats of regulations and things like that. But the big brand tenets stay the same.
Last two. We're going to squeeze two questions together. If you have multiple products, say as an artist, whether that's different mediums or different price points, how do you maintain consistency and avoid confusion for your buyers?
Fantastic. I think there's a couple of different ways to tackle that with pricing strategy and like product architecture. But one of my favorite brands of all time is a guy named Virgil Abloh, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the very multi-hyphenate designer. And he had an incredibly clear brand despite working on kind of every type of art and every type of medium under the sun. And so it was really about positioning him as somebody who is bringing a special sauce to all of these different mediums, not just somebody who is a designer or a music video director or a DJ, right? And so what I would encourage you to do is figure out what the thread is that ties all of the things together that you offer and make that part of your overarching story that then can be pulled down to all those different offerings.
All right, final question. Words of caution as you're building up your brand, and a lot of people don't know about it yet. And if we have time, we'll do one more quick one.
Sure, sure. I think it's important to measure twice and cut once, but it's not important to measure 4 times to cut once. So orient towards action, especially when you're just starting off. I mean, Kendall, we talked about this at the beginning of Cohart. Like, you kind of just have to try things to see if there's product market fit. And once you get product market fit, that's really important. And that's kind of what's going to be the rocket fuel. But in reality, what I advise really, really early stage companies on, earlier than Kendall, we started working together, but focus less on your brand and marketing and much more on getting your product right, whether that's art or a tech platform or an app or whatever. Get that right, get product market fit, then use brand to be your rocket fuel.
Okay. And then I'm just going to read this one. In the early 2000s, the concept of mass customization bubbled up and was later even more possible with social media and tech development analytics. It is now hyper personalization. Are these concepts the same? Are they different? So I guess mass customization versus hyper personalization. And then how do smaller size businesses take advantage of this?
Oh, I love this. I love this. Part of it is a technological question. So I think that as technology evolves, as things like 3D printing become more prominent, we're going to be able to offer more products that are even more customized than in the past at a lower cost, right? And so I think that there is a segment of consumer that really wants that customizable product. They want that customizable feeling, right? They want to feel like they're in charge of what it is that they're making. But I also would say, the Apple model is one that is consistent for a reason. And you see it with cars like Rivian, for example, now, where there aren't 15 different options. There's 3 options. And it's really about buying into the system that's been set up, that's been established as the best way to do it. So I think you will see kind of a bifurcation of that. And there will be super, super customizable options that are hyper personalized based on data, analytics, targeting, et cetera, especially with marketing and communications as well. You'll get served ads that are made specifically for you. But in terms of products, I think that I still think that people really buy into and trust the idea of something that is curated at a large scale that you can believe in and opt into.
Amazing. I thought the presentation was phenomenal, but that rapid fire Q&A was even more impressive. So thank you so much, Joseph. We really appreciate the time. We'll send out a recap. We'll send out Joseph's socials as well and his website, Major Futures, so you can follow along and be part of his incredible tribe. But we're just so grateful for your time. Oh, here we go. You're right on cue. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendall. This was a blast. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate it.